Okay, so what is the best way to maximize muscle and strength? So for 3 years now, because I started weightlifting when I was 13, so in like late 2022, I've been obsessed with this topic of, what is the best way to maximize muscle and strength? How do you maximize muscle growth, right? How do you maximize hypertrophy? How do you have that aesthetic, physique? I've just been obsessed with this topic. Having like a wide shoulders, a wide back, nice upper chest, right? Having like strong abs. So what is the best way to have that, 10 out of 10 aesthetic physique, and at the same time maximize muscle growth, and at the same time maximize strength? Now here's what I learned about this, right? So when I was 13 years old, in late 2022, I started weightlifting. I started training. I had two, like very light dumbbells on my room. That's when I started, right? And really, fitness was the thing that saved my life because, I was depressed. I hated my life. I had like suicidal thoughts. I just hated everything, right? I was very unhealthy. I was so, unattractive to girls, of course, because my lifestyle was just terrible, right? And fitness was kind of like my savior. It kind of like was this thing that saved me from that life. So I just got obsessed with it, and I was just researching, looking on YouTube, watching, the science-based YouTubers like Jeff Nippert and Jeremy Ethier, Mike Israetel, Renaissance Periodization, all these YouTube channels. But the thing they were saying was the best way to maximize muscle growth was volume. Volume is king. Volume is king. You have to do between 10 to 20 sets per muscle growth per week, right? I was doing like 4 or 5 sets, like 3 times a week, like so much. I would train for like 3 hours. I just got obsessed with fitness because it was the only thing I cared about. Nothing else mattered. It saved my life. It gave me all these benefits. So I just got obsessed with it, and I increased the volume because, all these science-based guys were saying like volume is king, volume is the best, right? And I bought heavier and heavier weights. So I started with like the 2-kilo dumbbells, but then it became 4 kilos, and then 6 kilos, and then, I have like 10 kilos, and started buying heavier and heavier dumbbells. And I was doing that. I was training push-pull like 6 days a week, right? Which is like insane volume for a beginner. And I was doing that, and I was actually building some muscle, right? I was building muscle. And I was just so fulfilled, and it was so nice, having to train every day. It was just so fun for me, that hard, I have to work out today. And working out was the only thing I did, not meditating, no journaling, no reading, nothing, right? So I did that. And I kept doing that for a while, right? But at the same time, those science-based influencers, and not only those, like everyone was saying, the best way to maximize muscle growth was also to train to failure, to train like really, really hard and get close to failure. Failure is basically when you keep doing like reps, when you keep moving the weight up and down, but then you go to a certain point where the reps keep getting slower and slower and slower until you can't get another rep. It's impossible. You try to get that last rep, and then you go down, and then you try to get the other rep, but you can't. It's impossible. Like your muscles have nothing in them. You have recruited all the motor units. You have maximized mechanical tension. You can't do anything anymore. So that's why it's called failure, basically, because you failed to get another rep. So what I did was so crazy, because this was the only thing I cared about. I didn't care about anything else, just fitness. I was training push-pull like 6 days a week, doing like 16 to 20 sets for every muscle group, whilst training close to failure, or even sometimes training to failure, right? And of course, I did that for all of 2023, and I was building some muscle. But then I started feeling terrible, I started feeling very, very tired, very sore, I started having mood swings, started getting angry, and I was just like, no, this is normal, and my motivation just plummeted. I had no motivation. I had zero motivation to train at all. So I told myself, you know what? Keep pushing through, you know, who cares? I was also like really into David Goggins, watching like David Goggins and Greg Play and Hamza and Iman Gadzhi, you know, really into it. And I was also, you know, becoming like really way more attractive to girls because, you know, I'm building like my physique, I'm getting, you know, bigger, right? Getting freaking jacked, boys. But I was getting bigger and I was becoming more attractive because, you know, I'm focused on becoming a better man. But just my motivation plummeted. I started being like very, very tired and I hated training. I didn't like training at all. And I had like a very bad appetite. I would like barely be able to eat, but at the same time I feel very hungry, but I can't eat anything, right? My sleep just got terrible. Like everything was just going down, right? Everything was just getting worse. And what I realized, this was in 2024, I believe, so like 2 years ago, I was overtrained and I was severely overtrained, but I didn't realize that, and I kept pushing and pushing and pushing until I realized that, yeah, I was overtrained and I wasn't able to train for 6 months. Yeah, I had to take 6 months off, and those were like one of the hardest 6 months of my life because, you know, at that time I was really into self-improvement, meditating, journaling, reading. I was doing all the other habits, but I couldn't lift weights because I was just so overtrained. I was doing like a lot of stretching and yoga to recover because I realized that. But in those 6 months, I started actually studying, you know, how do muscles grow? Now, if you're really into fitness like me, you know, you love going to the gym, you love working out, and you watch like fitness content a lot, you will realize that there are always like two camps to choose from. Basically, there is always like the high volume science-based camp, you know, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, you know, style of training. But at the same time, there's like the high intensity, train all the way to failure, do low volume, high intensity, Mike Mentzer, Dorian Yates style of training. There's always like these two camps. And that's when I discovered how actually muscles grow. And that's when I actually discovered high intensity training, which I believe, in my opinion, is the best way to train, to maximize muscle growth, to maximize strength, to have the aesthetic physique. And it just made way more sense to me. It just made way more sense because it's based on real evidence. And this is when I actually learned the first principles of maximizing muscle and strength. Now, you know, bro, when we want to learn anything, we break it down from the first principles. We break it down from the base. If we imagine like a building, right? You first build the base and then you build the building, right? You can't build a building on a weak base, right? It has to be the strongest base. So this is when I actually learned the first principles of maximizing muscle and strength. Now, if we're just talking training, right, because I know nutrition and sleep are like the first principles of maximizing muscle and strength, but if we're strictly talking about training, right, there are three first principles, which are mechanical tension, motor unit recruitment, and progressive overload. You're like, I don't know what the hell any of that means. You will. Now, buckle in your seat because this is like the deep part of the video. Like, I'm gonna go like really deep here, because this is like really like scientific stuff, right? But I'm gonna try to make it as simple as possible, right? So the first thing, motor unit recruitment. Now, this was discovered by Elwood Henneman in the 1950s, right? Basically, what this means is your muscle fibers, right? Your muscles are made of, you know, small strands that are called fibers, right? And every sort of group of fibers is attached to motor units. They're attached to small things called motor units. Basically, if we imagine like building muscle like a building, right? You know, you have like tons of workers, and every worker has like a leader. Every group of workers has like a leader. Those leaders of the workers are the motor units, right? And there are like large and high threshold motor units, and there are small, low threshold motor units. Basically, there are like, you know, leaders with tons of people, and there are leaders with, you know, just a small subset of of builders, right? I hope this analogy makes sense, right? The way to recruit all of the motor units, right, from the low threshold motor units, the smallest motor units, to the high threshold, the biggest motor units, the fast twitch muscle fibers, which are actually the muscle fibers that build the most muscle. The way to build that is through effort, is through training to failure. The closer you get to failure, the more motor units you recruit, basically the more muscle you recruit, and you activate, the more motor units you recruit, and the larger and the more fast twitch muscle fibers you recruit. So basically the bigger muscle fibers that grow the most, basically. So if you didn't understand anything, the closer you get to failure, the more muscle you build. It's that simple. Or the more muscle you recruit. And that is Henneman's size principle, which is one of the core first principles of building muscle. So that's the first thing. We have to train to failure to maximize motor unit recruitment. And this was discovered also by James Fisher and James Steele in 2011. Now the second thing is mechanical tension. And this was discovered by Brad Schoenfeld in 2011 to be the primary driver of muscle growth. So basically Brad Schoenfeld, he's a researcher, and he basically did a study to find out what is the primary driver of muscle growth. And he looked at, the three drivers of muscle growth we believed for basically all the time were metabolic stress, muscle damage, and mechanical tension. So I'll explain each one. Metabolic stress is kind of like the burning sensation you feel, when you do like leg extensions, you feel like this burning sensation in your muscles. The muscle is building up lactic acid. Basically that burning feeling that comes when you do like very fast reps, or you do like very explosive movements. You feel like that burning sensation. It's because of lactic acid in your muscles. Basically that is metabolic stress. The second primary driver that we believed caused muscle growth was muscle damage. And muscle damage is basically small micro tears in the muscle. So when you work out, for example, when you do like bicep curls, for example, your muscles get tiny, like small, very small microscopic tears in them. And those tears, when you eat and you sleep well, you build them up, and then your muscle gets a little bit bigger. We believe that was another primary driver of muscle growth. That's muscle damage. And the third driver of muscle growth is mechanical tension. And this is basically the force your muscles produce under load. So if you imagine, like, if you're doing like an incline press, right? And you're pulling the dumbbells down, right? You're pulling them down. And then you push up. Your muscle is pushing resistance up on load, under weight. That is mechanical tension. That stretch part, especially, that is when mechanical tension is the highest. When you go like very deep down on an incline press, or maybe you go like way down on bicep curls, that's when mechanical tension is the highest, right? Now, up until 2011, we believed that those were the three drivers of muscle growth: metabolic stress, muscle damage, mechanical tension. We believed those were like the core three. And that's why we did high volume, workouts, because we thought that we needed to maximize like the three, right? We needed to maximize muscle damage, which is maximized through, we had to do like very heavy weights to maximize muscle damage. We had to do tons and tons of reps. If you look at like the Pumping Iron Arnold Schwarzenegger DVDs in the 70s and 80s, you will understand this, because we believed at that time that those were the primary drivers of muscle growth, muscle damage. That's why they did like tons and tons of sets, 20, 30, 40 sets even, to maximize metabolic stress, to build as much lactic acid in the muscle, right? And mechanical tension, we had to train to close to failure. But what Brad Schoenfeld realized, and this is one of the biggest research findings in all of exercise science, is Mechanical tension is the primary driver of muscle growth, and muscle damage and metabolic stress have little to nothing to do with muscle growth at all. Mechanical tension, like I said, is the force your muscles produce under load, under tension, basically. That's what it means. And the way we maximize that is, of course, slowing the eccentric, using heavy weights, emphasizing that deep stretched part, but most importantly, training to failure. Because when you train to failure, you maximize the force your muscles produce under load, aka mechanical tension, right? So motor unit recruitment, maximize through training to failure. Mechanical tension, maximize through training to failure. The last thing, which is progressive overload, and we know this is one of the core first principles of building muscle, maximizing muscle and strength, is basically a stronger muscle is a bigger muscle. The stronger you get, the more muscle you build. We have to, if mechanical tension is the primary driver of muscle growth, then that tension needs to be consistent. We need to consistently challenge the muscle, challenge it with either increasing reps or weight, right? Because if we imagine, like, if you do one set to failure, right, maximizing muscle growth, maximizing mechanical tension, maximizing motor unit recruitment, what will happen is your muscles will be put under tension, and basically a lot of things will happen in your body. You know, the mTOR pathway will be stimulated. It will signal to your body that you need to eat more to build muscle. It will stimulate protein synthesis. Basically, your body is telling itself that it needs to eat, it needs to sleep to build muscle. And when you do that, you build muscle. Your muscles get a little bit thicker, right? They get a little bit thicker in cross-sectional area. What happens after that is the way to do that, to do that again and again and again, is to increase either the reps or the weight. So if you did like bench press for like 80 pounds, right, for 10 reps, that's like all the way to failure. If you go into the gym, the next time you do 85 pounds for like 5 reps, and then the next time you do 85 pounds for 7 reps, and then the next time 85 pounds for 9 reps, right? And you keep increasing the reps and the weight. That way you're constantly challenging the muscle. You're constantly putting the muscle under maximal mechanical tension, but at the same time you train to failure. So basically the first principles of building muscle are train to failure and progressive overload. Training to failure maximizes mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment, and progressive overload basically is the way you constantly challenge the muscle. Now, what about volume, right? Because I know, like, even right now, we always hear like volume is the primary driver of muscle growth, which makes absolutely no sense. And I will prove it to you. Like, if you go into the gym and you do 100 sets, 50 reps each, like very, very high volume, right? Like maximizing volume, right? Which is the primary driver of hypertrophy, which makes no sense. If you do that, but you use like the very light pink dumbbells, you will get a massive pump, you will get very sore, you will for sure maximize metabolic stress and muscle damage, but you won't build any muscle at all, because mechanical tension is the primary driver of muscle growth. That's it. But you could genuinely, if you go into the gym and you do one heavy ass set, all the way to momentary muscular failure, when you literally attempt to do another rep, but it's impossible to do another rep because you've maximized motor unit recruitment and you maximize mechanical tension, that will maximize muscle growth, because mechanical tension is the primary driver of muscle growth. I tell you, it were true that volume was the primary driver of muscle growth if this was, back in the day, right? 1980s, 1970s, 1960s, because we didn't know what was the primary driver of muscle growth. We thought it was all three. We thought it was muscle damage, metabolic stress, and mechanical tension. But now that we know it's mechanical tension, the primary driver of muscle growth is training to failure with heavy weights and emphasizing that stretch, emphasizing the eccentric. Just that. You could do one set or even one rep, as crazy as that sounds, and still maximize muscle growth because you're maximizing mechanical tension. Now the thing is, mechanical tension, it's not something that you can feel. You can't feel muscle growth. You can't feel the stimulus because you don't have nerve endings connected to the muscles that tell you that you stimulated mechanical tension or not. You don't have that, right? We don't have that in our bodies, unfortunately. But the purpose of weightlifting is to stimulate muscle and strength. It's to maximize muscle growth and to maximize strength. That's why Lee Haney says stimulate, don't annihilate. Mike Mentzer says something which I love, which is weightlifting, it's not an endurance contest. You're not going to see, for how long can you do high volume, for how long could you lift weights, for how many reps and how many sets. It's not an endurance contest. It's to stimulate muscle growth. That's the purpose of it. It's to stimulate. And if that means you're going to be in the gym for 30 to 40 minutes max, but that maximizes mechanical tension, therefore maximizes muscle growth, then we will do that. So I honestly believe high intensity training makes way more sense, is way more logical, is backed by the first principles of maximizing muscle growth and strength. And I certainly believe it's the best way to train. Now, I might be proved wrong, I might change my mind, but right now I do believe it's the best way to train. And I'll actually continue the story in 2025, right? So for 2024, I was barely able to train. I couldn't train at all because I was overtrained, right? In 2025, I did everything I learned in those 6 months of overtraining. And I am telling you, I built the most muscle I have ever built in my life. I got stronger on every single lift. Every single lift I just got stronger and stronger and stronger, increasing 2 reps, even 3 reps sometimes, increasing the weight, like getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And basically, the best way to know if you're building muscle or not is if you're getting stronger. And I was getting stronger like every single workout. Every single workout I would get stronger. And I'm increasing reps until now. But now in 2026, I'm trying something a little bit different, which is I'm doing high intensity training, but I'm trying to see what happens if I increase the frequency from once a week to twice a week. So basically I was doing push-pull legs 3 days a week, basically. So push, rest, pull, rest, legs, rest, and then repeat. But that's training the muscle once a week. So what I'm doing is I'm doing an upper-lower split 4 days a week. But I'm testing to see if this will potentially build more muscle, because you're getting more chances to progressively overload. And I'm just testing this. I'll see what happens after like 8 weeks, after like 2 or 3 months. I'll see what happens after this, and I'll update you, bro. But yeah, it just makes way more sense. Like, volume training, it makes absolutely no sense, man. Like, the example that I just gave you, bro. Like, you could go into the gym, literally do 100 sets, but if it's with those pink dumbbells, very light dumbbells, and you're training like very far away from failure, you're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna stimulate anything, because there is no mechanical tension. Because intensity is what stimulates muscle growth. Intensity is the primary driver of muscle growth. I'm not saying, high volume training doesn't work. It does work. It does work, because basically it's just this very like stupid way to train, honestly, because you're training 1, 2, even 3 reps before failure, so you're not stimulating enough motor units. You're leaving out the biggest and highest threshold motor units, and you're not maximizing mechanical tension because you're stopping way short of failure, but you do that for more sets. So yeah, you will build muscle because there is some intensity there. You are getting some effective reps, but it's not optimal at all. Like, why would you compensate with 3, 4, 5 sets and not train to failure when you can just do it all in just one set? One set maximizes mechanical tension, maximizes motor unit recruitment. Now the thing is, a lot of people will say, but what if one set's not enough, Perfectly fine. If you do one set of bench press, for example, and you go all the way to failure, right? All the way, like balls to the wall. You attempt to do another rep, but it's impossible, right? And the spotter lifts it off you. Now, that will maximize mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment. But if you feel like you can do another set and you feel fresh and you feel good, do another set. Do another set. And that way you're leaving nothing in the tank. That way you are maximizing mechanical tension and motor unit recruitment. But this nonsense of, no, you have to start with 10 sets a week, otherwise you're not building any muscle. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what about people like Dorian Yates, who did just 4 sets for his chest and has one of the best chests in bodybuilding history, and did like 6 sets for his back, and people say he has the best back in bodybuilding history? What about Mike Mentzer? Dorian Yates won 6 Mr. Olympias. Mike Mentzer, Mr. Universe. Okay, but they're enhanced, they're genetically gifted. Okay, what about natural bodybuilders? People like Jeff Alberts, who's one of the most decorated bodybuilders in all of natural bodybuilding. He does 2 sets per exercise to failure. What about Mr. America Hart, John Hart? What about Tom Kiatipis, who does push-pull legs 3 days per week? And if we look at the core reason, the number one reason 90% of people don't build any muscle, it's never because they're not doing enough volume. It's because they're not training hard enough. That's it. And this is actually the biggest reason I stopped going to gyms, by the way. Like, every single time I go into the gym, people are barely even stimulating anything, and I can see it. Like, people do 1, 2, 3. They never train hard. Like, I remember one time I was in a commercial gym, and I'm doing incline bench with dumbbells, and I'm like doing my 1 or 2 sets per muscle per. I was doing incline bench press, right? Incline dumbbell press, yeah. And I'm doing my set, and I'm taking it like all the way to failure. And I'm training, and I'm like grunting and making like noises, and I'm making like those, ugly faces, right? And I'm like pushing, and the reps are slowing down, and I'm getting closer and closer to failure. And I'm pushing myself, and this guy who's standing next to me, he's telling me, "That's enough. That's enough. Yeah, that's the failure." But I feel like I have 2 more in me. Like, people, like, we are so bad at knowing how close we are to failure. That's why I hate this nonsense of RIR. Train 1 to 2 reps before failure. First of all, the evidence that claims that training 1 to 2 reps before failure is the same as training to failure is very weak. I have never seen an actual study that claims that. And it directly contradicts the first principle of building muscle, which is motor unit recruitment. Like, how are you gonna convince me that less effort recruits the same motor units as more effort. Like, because Henneman's size principles claims the closer you get to failure, the more motor units you recruit. Then how, when you stop 1 to 2 reps short of failure, you recruit the same motor units as if you went all the way to failure? It doesn't make any sense. It contradicts one of the core principles of building muscle, which is Henneman's size principle, motor unit recruitment. So RIR is just pure nonsense in my opinion. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you, like, if you do 3 sets, 1 to 2 reps before failure, first of all, how do you know that those reps are close enough to failure? Second of all, if you don't build muscle, do you go to 4 sets or do you go to 2 sets? Like, what do you do? But if you're doing high intensity training, if you're doing 1 set to absolute failure, then you will know for sure. If you're pushing it all the way to failure, you won't be able to do another set. No, bro, like, so many people will tell me, no, but the studies say that volume is way better. Yes, of course, volume is better. Multiple sets are better than 1 if you're not training to failure. Of course they are better. But if you are training all the way to failure, then you don't need any more sets. Like, if you're training close to failure with RIR, with reps in reserve, because you're not stimulating enough motor units and you're not producing enough force for mechanical tension to be maximized. Does that make sense? Like, I hope I'm making sense in this video, because like, and I realized this in my life, like, so many of the things that, like, it really comes down to the law 1 of self-improvement. Never do what everyone else does. Like, even in the productive habits, never do what everyone else does. Like, in building muscle and strength and, you know, building an aesthetic physique, never do what everyone else does, because it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. It's not rooted in the first principles of maximizing muscle and strength, which is the volume training, the high volume training, you know, the reps in reserve and all this nonsense, right? That doesn't make any sense. High intensity training maximizes muscle growth, maximizes strength, and that's not even to say the benefits that it gives you when you train with it. Workouts are like, literally, I'm telling you, bro, my workouts are 30 to 40 minutes long. I have way more free time. I can actually, like, do things like record these videos, for example. I can read for like 3 to 4 hours. I have tons of free time, and I'm maximizing muscle strength, and I'm the biggest I've ever been in my life. I'm the most muscular I've ever been in my life, because I've been doing high intensity training. You have less wear and tear on your joints, you know? We know this, like, the leading cause of overtraining is excessive volume, not excessive intensity. And the reason we get injured in our joints is because of repetitive motion. Of course it is. When we keep doing the same movement, your muscles, yes, your muscles will adapt, but your joints adapt way slower. Especially if you're moving like heavy weights for a lot of sets, your chance of injury is way higher when you do high volume. So high intensity training is better in every way, in my opinion, honestly. And every single time I have tried to train with high volumes, it never works. I'm telling you, bro, like, this is actually a funny story. Like, I was researching on, you know, what is the best way to maximize muscle growth and strength, because this is what I'm focused on, like, right now, like, as I'm talking to you. And I told myself, you know what? You know, everyone says high volume is better, high volume is better. Let's try, all right? Let's try. I'm going to try to do high volume with reps in reserve, even though I hate that way of training. It sucks. It absolutely sucks for me. But I said, you know what? Let's try it. And I did like an upper lower split with like 3 to 4 sets per exercise, training close to failure. And I'm telling you, bro, I've done 2 workouts. I did an upper body workout and a lower body workout. Bro, I literally, like yesterday, I felt the symptoms of overtraining again. In just doing 2 workouts. I felt the symptoms of overtraining again. And that's the way they want us to train. Because excessive volume is the cause of overtraining, and it's not even the driver of muscle growth. Like it's so nonsense, man. It's so BS. It doesn't make any sense, man. Like, yes, it will build muscle. Yes, it will work. But high intensity training is just way more optimal. It's way more optimal long term. It's way better, in my opinion, of course. Like, I'm not claiming to know the truth or anything, but this is based on what I learned, based on what I know, and I'm open for debate. Like, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Tell me why high volume is better, and I will listen. Alright, so to answer the question, what is the best way to train to maximize muscle strength? High intensity training. Do 1, 2, 3, 4 workouts per week, max. Do 1 set per exercise for every exercise, all the way to failure, bro. All the way to failure, like until you can't do another rep. And every week, just focus on increasing either the reps or the weight. And I guarantee you, if you do that for 6 to 8 weeks, you will build the most muscle you have ever built in your life. I guarantee it, bro. I guarantee it. Like, why are so many of the people who were preaching volume training, I was one of those people, by the way, who were preaching volume training to everyone like a broken record, switching to high intensity training? People like Alex Leonidas, he said 2 sets are way better than 3. People like even Jeff Nippert himself, man. Even Jeff Nippert, he did a video called I Cut My Workouts in Half, and he said he got way better results with high intensity training than he did with high volume training. Like, bro, high intensity training is just way better in my opinion, honestly. You make way more gains in way less time. Alright, so yeah, that's just my opinion, of course. But the best way to train to maximize muscle and strength and get that, aesthetic physique is through high intensity training.